Welcome to the Chaos Sector. In the previous episode, we examined the crime scene. There were a few things to point out, which we will address at this point. The stairs, those stairs are important, in many ways. First off, Dylan would hear those footsteps, going upstairs, and then coming back downstairs. Regardless of how stealthful one would walk on those steps, you would hear a creaking of some sort. Second, a blood trail would have to be left by the killer, right? No blood trails were reported from Madison's bedroom, back to the second floor, including those stairs. Impossible. Now a former FBI director claimed that there were blood prints near Dylan's door, and they claimed Kohberger had these very blood prints in his vehicle, along with other evidence. To this day, that vehicle has not revealed any evidence. Let me guess, they're holding that for the trial? Logical, at face value. Here's why: blood prints discovered in Kohberger's vehicle matches the blood prints in the home. Bingo, Kohberger is going down. Mind you, this is the same as the DNA found on a knife sheath, and is actually more reliable, considering the oddities of that DNA found on the knife sheath. They don't have any evidence in his vehicle, of any sort, which compromises the DNA found on a knife sheath. Now, let's touch on something for a moment. Quote, they didn't have to go upstairs, unquote. As you all know, this is what Kaylee's father stated in an interview. This is a very important statement, but also, very revealing. Before we break it down, let's listen to that portion of the interview.
I had the opportunity to speak to some of my sources, and I've been told that there were differences in the way that the victims were killed. Some were more severe than the other. And this week we heard the target attack walk back and then reverse it back to it being a target attack. What can you tell us about the targeted attack?
They have told us that it was targeted, but they told us they can't tell who. We asked specifically, and they said, we'll try to get that information to you. And they got back to us a day or so later, and they said, we're sorry, we can't give you that information. But then a day later, we saw in the news that it was not targeted, or they think the whole house was targeted. But
I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Their means of death don't match.
Maddie's
They don't.
and Kaylee's cause of death, it does not match based on the autopsy report.
They don't match.
Would indicate that one of them
He doesn't have to
may
go
have
up
been
the
the target.
steps. Let's stop playing games, guys. I need somebody to step up and be an alpha. Be somebody to be a leader. Don't make me do it. I don't want to do it. He doesn't have to go up the steps. Their points of damage don't match. I'm just going to say it. It wasn't leaked to me. I earned that. I paid for that funeral. I paid for that. It's my right. You ain't taking that from me.
calm down.
If you don't want to say nothing, that's your bet. But don't say I'm leaking anything. I paid that bill. Sent my daughter to college to get an education. She came back in the box, and I can speak on that.
Now let's break that statement down from a psychological perspective. Keep that in mind. On one hand, the father is basically saying that two prior housemates were murdered, which would be Ethan and Xana, and the killer didn't have to go upstairs, as they had already killed two housemates. In retrospect, the father is so devastated of losing his daughter, in the sense of wishing she was still alive, he states, they didn't have to kill any more housemates. You understand? But, I'm guessing you don't believe that's what he meant. Here's the other. On the other hand, the father indicated that Ethan and Xana were the targets, and the killer didn't have to go upstairs, as Kaye and Madison had nothing to do with being targeted. Funny, because if we reverse it, in the narrative that it was Kaye who was targeted, Ethan and Xana wouldn't have anything to do with being targeted. This is a thinking man's game, my friends. But this would indicate that either Ethan or Xana, or both of them, were targeted, and the killer got, quote, greedy, and decided to see who else they could kill in the home. Let's run that by you one more time, and make your decision of which scenario he was speaking of.
He doesn't have to go up the steps. Their points of damage don't match. I'm just going to say it. It wasn't leaked to me. I earned that. I paid for that funeral. I paid for that. It's my right. You ain't taking that from me.
Calm down.
Based on the underlying anger in the tone of his voice, well, it's logical to suggest the father meant the latter. But there is a confusion here. If Kaylee's father basically alluded to those victims on the second floor being targeted, then mentioning the difference between Madison and Kaylee's wounds would also indicate Kaye was targeted, as her wounds were reported as being more severe. If the father states the killer didn't have to go upstairs, yet also acknowledges Kaylee's wounds were more severe, which indicates she was targeted, is he suggesting that Kaye should have been spared, despite being targeted? What do you make of it? That seems logical, but the main point is Kaylee's father is indicating someone was in fact targeted. We have come to the conclusion it were the very 4 housemates who were murdered. The parents know more, of course. This is why they've been ordered to stay silent about key details in the case. What's more important here? Do you think violating a gag order has more power over parents who have the right to take matters into their own hands by publicly revealing key information in the case?
I'm just gonna say it. It wasn't leaked to me. I earned that. I paid for that funeral. I paid for that. It's my right. You ain't taking that from me.
Calm down.
Think about it. The father even mentioned that speaking out will not hurt any investigation. But the reason there were gag orders is because what the parents knew had conflict with the prior investigation into the primary suspect of Kohberger. So ironically, the gag order had compromised the investigation. Like mentioned prior, we don't know exactly what the motive was. We assume it was drug-related. So here's another theory. Remember, this is a thinking man's game. Ethan, or even both Ethan and Xana, had been involved in drug-related activity and had gotten themselves in a world of trouble. Okay, let's walk through this. Prior to the murders, Ethan had paid several peers via Venmo account, including one to his best friend Hunter. What this indicates is Ethan was borrowing money. Nothing wrong with that really, but it does provide potential evidence of debt problems. Now we take a peek at the rumor of drug money. It was rumored that the housemates had dumped a huge amount of drugs, which led to them being hunted down.
It's a real head-scratcher for me. In the affidavit on the crime scene, it states that Ethan was unalived by a sharp, blunt force object. Not a K-bar like it states for everyone else. Why? Why would you not say that everyone was done in by the same weapon if it was only one person? Why are you saying a sharp, blunt force object and a K-bar? Why would one person bring 2 different weapons to a crime scene? That is twice the opportunity to make a mistake, leave something behind, or leave DNA behind. It makes no sense. That sharp, blunt force object is obviously a machete to me, in my opinion.
And I would definitely agree with that belief. Ethan's wounds were different from Xana's. Sharp force is not describing a K-bar knife, it's describing a weapon much larger, such as a machete, axe, hatchet, or other tools one could use from Arlington Hardware and Lumber. Yeah, we haven't forgotten about that business, likely that a tool/weapon was used to murder Ethan from that store. The alleged Kohberger using a K-bar knife against Ethan, who was over 6 feet, and perhaps close to 200 pounds, and athletic, would lead to a physical struggle, and that K-bar knife could be dropped, or knocked out Kohberger's hand. It would be over at that point. Kohberger would be, quote, immobilized. Let's continue with the claims, just wanted to point that out.
And this indicates to me, in my opinion, that there had to be at least 2 people involved in this. I don't really see how there could not be. So, what really happened? Is it Kohberger who walked in by himself and took out everyone, all alone? Or is it something much more sinister, much deeper? Like a pre-planned hit to make an example of someone for flushing $275,000 worth of illegal substances down the toilet, possibly? Emma and Demetrius get into a fight that night with Xana and Ethan over such stolen property. Who's to say that fight was on purpose, and that their fates were already sealed? All I know is, whatever I'm being told, does not add up. I think it doesn't for you as well. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you soon. And remember, do not be afraid to ask the hard questions.
Although this is slated rumors, which usually become discredited in the eyes of many, we never discredit what individuals claim to have happened, because nobody who has investigated this case knows if it's credible or not. We know one thing for sure: somebody spills something out. Such a crime of this magnitude, there will be mutters of truth spilling out into many social media forums. Now let's address Bonnie and Clyde. Sorry, their names are Demetrius and Emma. These 2 have been depicted as criminals, specifically drug pushers. There is information on them, such as arrest records for drug-related offenses. It's obvious how they operated, lurking throughout pushing their filth. But they are, quote, relatable to the college students, which gives them the social bond needed to establish trust. Make their rounds to all the parties in town, providing the college students with the drugs. But they themselves can't risk being out in these environments much, so they set up the middleman, the distributor, in the operation of sales. This is how the drug trafficking develops: set up operations in a home, have the drugs pushed through that home, and keep things very discreet, such as a party house known for, quote, drinking and loud noise. Now, to be honest, Moscow PD would be aware of this operation, and that's another key component to keep in mind. But let's focus on the housemates who are alleged to be involved in the drug trafficking. Ethan and Xana, based on the individual's claim, had gotten themselves into deep waters. They decided to dump, or flush, the drugs down the toilet, and this led to them being hunted down. Now why would they dump those drugs, knowing there would be consequences? Well, sure it would appear suicidal, but this is a thinking man's game, my friends. It would be logical that they would dump those drugs, because of the potential of Moscow PD searching the home for drugs. Mind you, although we know some of them were complicit with the drug trafficking, Ethan and Xana can't assume that every officer will look the other way. So in fear of going to jail for drug possession, which would more than likely be narcotics, they dumped it to ensure if the house was searched, or possibly raided, Moscow PD wouldn't find any narcotics, perhaps just a bit of marijuana, which is less of a charge. This is within the scenario that Ethan and Xana were involved in drug trafficking. It's a double-edged sword for these two, as they would have to confess to something. Either they claim it's someone else's drugs, which the narcotics would be confiscated by officers anyway, leading to a loss in profit, or they snitch on whose narcotics those were, which leads to them being hunted down for snitching. The only way out in that scenario is to get rid of the drugs, and promise Bonnie and Clyde they will pay off the debt. Which brings us back to the evidence of Ethan being in debt, as he borrowed money from his peers. Now how does Kaye and Madison fit into that equation? Well, for one, they would obviously know what was going on. But perhaps they had gotten themselves in trouble as well. Whatever Madison told Adam, which Jack S. felt was a huge mistake, indicates the information needed to be kept secret, or at least not revealed to that specific person in Adam. Kaye asking, quote, "What did you tell Adam?" is not really her unaware of what Madison told him, more so, the specifics of the issue. You understand? She obviously knew what Madison knew. Kaye wanted to know, did Madison tell Adam specifics? Such as names, dates, locations, etc. If there is a name revealed to Adam, then that name, in my opinion, is targeted. Quote, "Who did it?" Unquote. Quote, "It was, fill in blank with name." Unquote. Jack S. tells Madison, basically you're in trouble, for what you revealed to Adam. Madison, completely plastered, may have not realized the danger she was in. Or, had grown tired of being scared, and just left everything on the table, so to speak. But, bringing this all the way back to Kaylee's father, and mother, and even sister and brother, they knew those girls were targeted as well, for whatever link they had to drug-related activity. We are not saying they themselves were drug pushers for Bonnie and Clyde, although it's possible. But if the murders lean more towards drug-related activity, then we have to suggest the 4 victims had some type of connection to that drug activity. What do you guys think? Is this drug-related? We'll dig into it a bit more, but I think it's time to address the audio in that surveillance. Because there were names heard, and it didn't sound, quote, fake. This is the chaos sector.